Good day, dear grade 11 STEM Diceans, and welcome to our lecture video series on this lesson, A Tour to the Cell. So basically, this lecture video series will talk about the different parts of the cell which may appear in your first monthly test later on. So here is the coverage of your exam. We will cover your first lesson up to this lesson, including some parts of your recent space lab experience, no, at the BU and Curie laboratories. So lesson 1 is about the characteristics of life, and let's recall that life has these 7 characteristics, no, which is only shared by those who are living. So in this case, that would be biological order, where we are made up of cells organized into tissues, organs that will make up a whole organism, right? And we also have reproduction, which can be sexual or asexual. We also have growth and development, and then sensitivity or response to stimuli. And we also have regulation, no? A way to maintain our internal balance, including energy processing. No? We need energy, so for us to move, to grow, and so on. And finally, living things evolve. No, they change in accordance to the changes in the environment. We also covered spontaneous generation in one colloquium that we had together, right? So, spontaneous generation is simply an obsolete theory. It means we do not believe in this theory anymore. So, it just shows that life can come from non-life, which is not the thing we believe today, right? So I hope you can still remember the spaghetti story we had in our colloquium. And for that part, you must remember the names and also the experiments that they have conducted to prove or to disprove the theory of spontaneous generation. And on lesson 2.2, we have the cell theory. This is done in classroom, so I hope that you can still remember the proponents behind these things about the cells that we have today, right? So that's about Robert Hooke. We also have Matthias Claydon, Theodore Schwann, Rudolf Virchow, right? And Anton van Leeuwenhoek. And also, please don't forget Robert Remak, who actually made that discovery that cells would come from pre-existing cells. No, it was only Rudolf Virchow who actually popularized that. No, and in number 4, lesson 2.3, that's the parts of the cell. It's what we were going to we are going to discuss today or for this session. And finally, you have your Space Lab 2, which you must have conducted over this week or past week, right? So in this case, you must have performed microscopy and some staining techniques, no, in our preparation of specimens and viewing them under the microscope, including how to calculate the magnification of drawn specimens. Okay? So, for this lesson, on our tour to the cell, we will have to describe the structure of the cell and its parts and relate the structure of the cell parts with their function. Okay? But let's recall, no, what is a cell? And of course, the cell, as we knew from the cell theory lesson, it is the basic unit of life. It's the building block that builds up life, right? It's microscopic, basically cannot see it, but cells can be unicellular or multicellular. No, when we say unicellular, it means that the cell has only one cell, right? Or the organism has only a single cell. While multicellular organisms exist with more than just one cell, no, for it to survive. Again, if you are unicellular, you only need a single cell to live. But if you are multicellular, you require more than one. So you require more than more than one single cell for you to live. So it could be millions or billions, like in the case of human beings. And now the question is, where did all these cells originate? As we recall from the cell theory, all cells would come from pre-existing cells, right? So a cell would come from another cell, and that cell would come from another cell, and that cell would come from another cell, and so on and so forth. But if we will trace that back in time and in history, we will have to ask, where did the first cell originate? Right? So, all organisms, according to this hypothesis, share a most recent common ancestor, which we call the last universal common ancestor, or LUCA. So, LUCA was hypothesized as a single-celled organism formed around 3.6 to 3.8 billion years ago. That's a very long time. The Earth was formed around 4.6 billion years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And that's according to your lessons in Earth Science, right? And it takes a billion of years before that first cell to come in place, right? And that is where all the rest of the cells found in animals, plants, bacteria, fungi would come from. So, in this case, LUCA contained organic molecules and RNA-like materials for informational and catalytic functions, which would later give us life, right? Over time, these populations of LUCA evolved. Some of them would become the bacteria, some of them would become us, some of them would become the plants and other living organisms here on Earth. So basically, we are all relatives, right? So the mosquito you kill whenever you spat it on your arm, for example, is actually a relative. It's your distant relative through LUCA. The same is true when you go to the bathroom and then kill off all the germs on your body using your safeguard soap. You're basically killing your relatives because we are all relatives by LUCA. So I find that really interesting. Anyway, we now go to the cell organelles. No? Cell organelles are what we call the little organs that are found inside your cell. So basically, in your lab experience last week, no, aside from the cytoplasm, that space inside your cell, you will discover that there are more parts that we are yet to see here. No? So these are your cell organelles. They are basically smaller than the nucleus. They are just floating around that cytoplasm in the spaces inside the cell. No? I hope you could still remember what are these cells you have found in the laboratory. For example, your cheek cells and onion skin cells. What you have found in them are actually the nuclei and the cytoplasm. But in that cytoplasm, you'll see later on that there are actually organelles floating around. So we will go into them one by one in a while. Okay? And now, what do all cells have? So all living things have cells that share the following structures. Okay, again, all living cells, regardless if you are a bacteria or if you're a human or a plant, you must have all these four. Right? So ibig sabihin, or what I mean here is that all of the cells will contain the following. If you do not have at least one of them, you're not alive. You're not a cell. Okay? So the first thing is that you need a cell membrane. And the cell membrane is what surrounds the entire thing, the entire cell. So a cell membrane is made up of phospholipids, or these are like fat structures. Okay? These are fats that would cover around your cell. All of the cells, bacterium, plants, animals, fungi, and you would have a cell membrane. Okay? Again, it's the boundary of life. It protects the life inside and it protects it from the environment which is non-alive outside. Right? And the second is the cytosol. No? We've heard cytoplasm already in the space lab. But how is cytosol different from cytoplasm? Okay? Cytosol is the fluid where all the organelles will float. Okay? But cytoplasm is a space. It's basically nothing. Right? So, cytosol is actually a part of the cell. It's actually the fluid. It's an ocean inside that cell where all of these things will float. So, for example, your organelles like your nucleus, we have your mitochondria, the vacuoles, all of them will float in the cytosol. Okay? Again, cytosol is the fluid, while cytoplasm is the space inside the cell. Okay? The third thing that cells should have is DNA, and it is this genetic material that will dictate the identity of an organism. So I hope you can recall what's the structure of the DNA, which you must have learned already in your grade 10 classes, no, when you covered the central dogma of molecular biology. Okay? But don't worry, we will have another recap on that in our future lessons in Gen Bio 1. So, again, that DNA is the genetic material that will dictate who you are. And just so you know, for humans, if we will unravel our DNA, that will take us 2 meters long. That's higher than our height, actually. So, that DNA, just imagine, it can be contained inside a single cell. And take note, you have billions of cells in your body. So, just imagine, if you have these 2-meter long DNA, how long could that be if we will get all these DNA from all our cells, right? Have you ever wondered of that? And finally, all cells should have ribosomes. And ribosomes, as we recall in our lessons on central dogma of molecular biology in grade 10, okay, these are parts where proteins are manufactured. Okay, so these are sites of protein synthesis. And again, proteins are what will make up some parts of the cell. No, it's very vital for our life processes. Okay? And now, let's begin the tour to the cell. Okay? So this is a diagram, an illustration of the cell. This is not a real model, by the way. This is not a real cell, but it's a 3D model of the cell. Okay, so I hope you can appreciate its structure, and by now you can pinpoint to me where are the parts of the cell. Where could be those ribosomes? No? Where could be the cytosol? Where is the DNA located? And where is the cell membrane? Okay, I hope you'll take this time to imagine where you can find these 4 common structures that all cells have. And now we begin our tour to the cell with the nucleus. The nucleus is one of the most obvious parts you have found in your specimens in the lab last week, right? It's a densely stained region located inside your cheek and onion cells. So the nucleus is that area which houses all genetic information. Okay? That includes your DNA. All of the things that would dictate the identity of the cell and the identity of the human being or of the organism would be found inside the nucleus. Okay? At the same time, if these instructions inside the DNA are found inside your nucleus, the nucleus will also have this special function that will control all cellular activities. It will dictate what kind of structure it will have based on the messages found inside its DNA, right? And at the same time, aside from that structure, it will also dictate what kind of function will it have. Okay? So that's why the nucleus is considered as the control center of the cell. Okay, in a society, I think that would be the Malacanang Palace. No? The president will have to decide on what laws to enact, what laws to implement in a society. So that could be similar to the role of the nucleus. Okay? And this nucleus would have its own parts, right? The one that would separate the nucleus from the cytoplasm would be the nuclear envelope. Okay, it separates the nucleus from the cytoplasm so that the DNA will also be protected inside. The second is the nucleolus. It's actually a darker region located inside the nucleus which actually form these ribosomes. And what are ribosomes again? Okay, as we recall earlier, the ribosomes are these protein manufacturers. So these protein manufacturers don't just come out of the cytoplasm alone. They would be migrated or transported from the nucleus to the cytoplasm. Again, your ribosomes are manufactured inside the nucleolus. So without the nucleolus, there will be no ribosomes who will be making these proteins. And finally, we have the chromatin. And it spools the DNA such that they will be packaged in dense structures. Take note, your DNA is 2 meters long for humans. So, for that to be enclosed inside your nucleus, they have to be packaged properly. They have to be spooled around like thread. So, again, chromatin has a function to package these DNA in very, very dense structures. And we have the ribosomes. Again, these are your protein synthesizers or manufacturers. They are like factories in a society. And these factories would mass produce these products. So, for example, in the case of the cell, that would be proteins, right? So, ribosomes are found in various parts within the cell. The first is that they are found attached on the nucleus. So, they could be probably be found on those parts of the nuclear envelope, right? As we recall earlier. Or they could be floating in the cytoplasm. So they could be free floating like a boat that would sail around the ocean of the cytosol. And they could be also found in the rough endoplasmic reticulum, which we will be mentioning later on. Okay? So again, these ribosomes will translate all that information coming from the DNA and the RNA to synthesize proteins. Okay, I hope you can still recall your central dogma of molecular biology. So first is that you have your DNA, which needs to undergo transcription inside the nucleus. So after transcription, you'll get a message. And that message is carried by your messenger RNA, which will travel from the nucleus to the cytoplasm, reaching to your ribosomes. And the ribosomes will read the message in the mRNA so that it can manufacture the corresponding protein. I hope that's clear. So, if not, please do recall your transcription and translation lessons before. Okay? Yan. And that ends our first part of the lecture.